Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, and we're going to be discussing the year-to-date return on investment, or ROI. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and check out Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Now, I know we spoke about this metric not too long ago, but I thought it might be worthwhile to just simply go through it again. So this is the year-to-date return on investment as a function of time for Bitcoin going back all the way to 2011. But if you isolate 2014 and 2018, you'll see that they were primarily just simply bear market years, as was 2022. And if you take the average return as a function of time for 2014 and 2018, you can actually see that 2022 ended up being essentially just the average. Okay. Now, the reason why we looked at that is because it would be interesting to take a look at what typically happens after a primary bear market year, right? So you look at 2015, you look at 2019, and of course, now we find ourselves in 2023. All right. Now, the things that we notice from both prior years that came after a bear market is that we had deviations to the upside and we had deviations to the downside, right? In 2015, we had a very significant deviation to the downside in January. And in fact, it happened on about January 14th, right? Today is actually January 14th. The other interesting thing that I want to draw your attention to is there's some level of this mirroring each other, right? So if you look at the drawdown here that Bitcoin had in 2015 early on, by January 14th, so 2 weeks into the new year, it dropped about 45%. You can see the year-to-date ROI by then is 0.548, meaning it dropped about 45% or so. And what's interesting is if you take a look at Bitcoin, recently anyways, at least as measured from November, it's actually up about 35%. But year to date, Bitcoin is up about 26, 27% or so. So it does seem like there's some element of it almost just doing the opposite, at least early on, of what 2015 was doing. Rather than collapsing down immediately, it's going up a lot in the short term, of course. Now, the thing that we note from both 2015 and 2019 is that, again, there were deviations to the upside and the downside. So, for instance, in 2019, we had a very brief deviation to the downside where Bitcoin went down below about 10% from its yearly open. And then it went on a fairly short-term bull run that only lasted a few months. And then it faded that rally for the second half of the year. And then in 2015, we deviated to the downside first. And then the deviation to the upside actually came, at the very end of the year. Okay, so my speculation, as we've talked about before, is that 2023 is likely going to see a mix of both, right? We're probably going to see some deviations to the upside. We'll likely see some deviations to the downside. My guess is that this year will probably be somewhat choppy, where we go up for a little bit, we go down for a little bit. I don't really think we're going to go to I don't think Bitcoin's headed to new all-time highs this year, but you should be prepared for for significant amounts of volatility. I used to think that this year would just be somewhat of a boring year. But I do think that this, what the Fed is doing and the recession fears and all that sort of stuff, I do think it's going to keep things fairly intense, right? So I think we're going to see a lot of volatility in both directions. So right now, Bitcoin is up this year. I mean, if you look, say, year to date, it's up about it's up about 25% or so, right? So you can see the ROI is 1.25. If we actually take, sorry, I clicked on the wrong thing. If we actually take an average of 2015, so let me hide them all again and go back to 2015, 2019, and 2023. If you take an average of 2015 and 2019, this is what you get, right? So, fairly lackluster start in both cases, but by the end of the year, at least by the middle of the year, the ROI on average was around 2, and then it sort of faded that into the third quarter back down to about 1.4 or so. Again, the average drawdown from both ended up being about 25% as a function of time. So again, my speculation is that we will just see deviations to the upside and the downside, even though I know it's really hard to imagine that right now with Bitcoin going up essentially every single day. But the year after the bear market year is often a recovery year where sometimes you put in a new low, sometimes you don't. And I do think the main risk right now that is sort of plaguing the cryptoverse is just whether we end up going into a recession or not. I think that's probably the main risk that we face. But in the short term, it's not really behaving that dissimilar from things we've seen in the past. I mean, in 2019, the ROI actually at its top as a function of time ended up being about 2x or so. Again, that's not measured from the bottom. It's just simply, or sorry, that's the average. If you go to 2019, it was actually a little bit more than 2. It was like 3.5, right? 3.5 or so. So if you measure it from the beginning of 2019, it actually gave you a max upside of 3.5. Don't really think we're going to go up 3.5x this year, but we could certainly spend some time in between these levels and sort of just spending a year chopping before hopefully getting moving a little bit more in 2024. But that's generally what I see right now. It's interesting if you actually zoom in on 2023, it's like it's just straight up, right? So you see like this sort of like parabolic move here in the short term where it gets started off slowly and then it really starts to pick up pace, and then the higher it goes, the more likely people are to then FOMO in at a new local top, right? And then it'll probably get sold off for a little bit, and then there'll be people wishing they hadn't FOMO'd in, right? So you really have to come up with a strategy that just simply works for you over the long haul, rather than trying to pick the exact the exact bottom or anything like that. I think just come up with a strategy that makes sense for you. But again, right now Bitcoin is currently sitting just below $21,000. And as we talked about yesterday, the dominance is at least moving higher, which is a good thing. But I did want to just provide that update on where the ROI is as a function of time for 2023 compared to 2019 and, of course, 2015, right? So far, this is the best year, right? Out of those other 2 years, right? So far, as a function of time, this is doing the best. We'll see how it continues to transpire throughout the year. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.